The black man sat in silence while the racist officer, under oath, spewed lie after lie with unwavering confidence. The jury listened. The judge listened. But then, one revelation changed everything. In an instant, the officer's face lost all color, his confidence crumbling before everyone's eyes. And when the truth finally hit the courtroom, his entire life collapsed right in front of them. The room was dead silent, but not the kind of silence that brings peace.
No.
This silence was thick, heavy, pressing down on everyone's chest like an unbearable weight. At the defendant's table, Malcolm Hayes sat still, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles had turned white. His pulse pounded in his ears, but his face? Unmoved. He had learned long ago that showing emotion as a black man in a courtroom could be dangerous. Across from him, Officer Daniel Briggs sat on the witness stand, his uniform crisp, badge gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. But his words? Filthy. "I saw the defendant flee the scene," Briggs declared, his voice firm, unwavering. "He was aggressive. Resisted arrest. We found stolen goods in his car."
Lies.
Every single word. Behind Malcolm, his mother stifled a quiet sob. She knew her son. He wasn't perfect, but he damn sure wasn't a criminal. She had raised him to be respectful, to keep his head down, to survive in a world that never wanted him to win. And yet, here he was, fighting for his freedom while a racist cop twisted reality right in front of them. The prosecutor barely even questioned Briggs.
Routine.
Expected. Just another black man, another guilty verdict waiting to happen. But Malcolm's lawyer, Vanessa Carter? She wasn't having it. She rose from her chair, heels clicking against the polished marble floor, her eyes burning with controlled fury. "Officer Briggs," she began, her voice smooth yet sharp, "are you absolutely certain of what you saw that night?" Briggs exhaled sharply. "I wouldn't be testifying under oath if I wasn't, ma'am." Malcolm didn't flinch, but inside, rage burned. He had been at home that night. He had proof. But the system wasn't built to listen to men like him. It was built to believe men like Briggs. Vanessa took a slow step forward. "You claim my client resisted arrest. Did your body camera capture this?" Briggs hesitated. It was malfunctioning. A ripple of murmurs spread through the courtroom. Malcolm shut his eyes for a brief second. Of course. Convenient. But what Briggs didn't know, the next 5 minutes would change everything. Because the truth wasn't just coming, it was about to crash down on him so hard, he'd never recover. A hush fell over the courtroom. Even the judge, who had barely lifted his eyes from his notes, finally looked up. "His body cam malfunctioned?" Judge Reynolds repeated, his brow raised. "How convenient." Malcolm inhaled deeply, pressing his hands flat against the cold table. He knew exactly how this played out. The words of a police officer, especially a white one, always held more weight than a black man's truth. But Vanessa? She wasn't rattled. She took another step forward, deliberately slow, letting the tension build. "Officer Briggs," she repeated, tilting her head slightly, "your body camera malfunctioned?" "How unfortunate." Briggs nodded, but for just a second, just a flicker, his face cracked. Malcolm saw it. So did Vanessa. And that's when she struck. Sliding a paper onto the evidence table, she smiled coolly. "It's a good thing you weren't the only officer on duty that night." Briggs' face twitched. "We pulled footage from Officer Grant's body cam," Vanessa said, her voice like silk, controlled, sharp. "Funny thing, his camera worked just fine." A sharp murmur spread through the courtroom. Malcolm's mother gasped, gripping the arms of her seat. She had spent her whole life preparing her son for this, for a fight he never should have had to fight in the first place. But maybe, just maybe, the tides were turning. Briggs stiffened. His once relaxed posture shifted. His hand twitched against his pant leg. Vanessa let the moment stretch, her piercing gaze locked onto him. "Would you like me to play the footage, Officer Briggs?" The courtroom air turned suffocating. The prosecutor shifted uneasily in his seat. Judge Reynolds leaned forward, folding his hands in front of him. Briggs swallowed hard. I don't see how that's necessary," but it was already too late. "Technician," The front screen in the courtroom flickered to life. Briggs' face drained of color, and then, right there, for everyone to see, the truth unraveled. The screen lit up, and suddenly, the entire courtroom was watching. Malcolm's heart pounded in his chest as the footage came to life. The grainy video from Officer Grant's body camera sharpened into focus. The setting was clear, a quiet neighborhood street, dimly lit by flickering street lamps. The night Malcolm was arrested, Vanessa crossed her arms, her gaze locked on Briggs. She saw it. His confidence was crumbling, cracking like thin ice under pressure. The recording played. At first, the audio was filled with static, background chatter from the police radio. Then, clear as day, Briggs' voice rang through the speakers. "That's him, right there. Black hoodie. Hands in his pockets. Looks suspicious as hell." A beat of silence swallowed the room. The air inside thickened, pressing down on everyone. Malcolm closed his eyes. He remembered that night. He had been walking home from a friend's house. That was it. But in Briggs' eyes, that was enough. Then, from the video, another officer's voice cut through. "Briggs, slow down, that guy's just walking." Briggs' response came instantly, dripping with arrogance. "Don't be sorry, Grant." A short chuckle. "They always act innocent. Watch this."
Gasps.
Malcolm's mother let out an audible whimper, her fingers digging into her seat. A few jurors exchanged nervous glances. Even the judge's expression darkened.
But the worst?
The worst was still coming. On screen, Briggs stepped out of the patrol car. The footage showed Malcolm, wearing headphones, completely unaware of what was about to happen. He wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. He was just existing. Briggs' voice echoed once again. "Hey, hands where I can see them." On the screen, Malcolm turned, startled.
What?
Before he could even finish, Briggs grabbed him, slamming him against the hood of the patrol car. The sound of Malcolm groaning in pain filled the courtroom. Then the most damning part of all. Briggs leaned in, his lips just inches from Malcolm's ear. The mic on Grant's vest picked up his words crystal clear. "You move an inch, boy, and I'll make sure you don't walk away from this." The courtroom erupted. Someone in the back cursed under their breath. Malcolm's mother clutched her chest, shaking her head. And Briggs? His face had gone completely white. Vanessa let the video play just a few seconds longer, just long enough to show the truth. No resisting. No stolen merchandise. No crime. Just a man walking home, and a cop who saw his skin as a weapon. Then, she turned to the judge. "Your Honor," she said, her voice razor-sharp, "the prosecution has built this case entirely on the testimony of this officer, an officer who not only lied under oath, but who was caught, on video, using threats and excessive force against an innocent man." She turned back to Briggs, who was visibly shaking now. "Tell me, Officer Briggs," she said, her voice dripping with steel, "do you still stand by your statement?" Silence. The entire room froze, all eyes locked on Briggs. And in that moment, everyone knew. His life was falling apart in real time. Briggs' throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. He looked trapped, like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, nowhere to go. His once steady hands gripped the witness stand's railing, his knuckles turning white. The silence was suffocating. Malcolm's heart pounded. His fists were still clenched beneath the table. This was it. This was the moment that would either break him, or finally set him free. Vanessa took a slow step forward. "I'll ask again, Officer Briggs," she said, her voice slicing through the tension like a knife. "Do you still stand by your statement?" Briggs' lips parted. His jaw tightened. But no words came. Nothing. Malcolm could see the sweat forming at his temple, the way his chest rose and fell in shaky breaths. He was cornered. The judge leaned forward, his voice laced with authority. "Officer Briggs," Judge Reynolds said, "I remind you, you are under oath." Briggs' fingers twitched. His leg bounced slightly under the stand. He glanced toward the prosecution table, but no one came to his defense. Even the prosecutor, who had been so eager to paint Malcolm as a criminal, now sat frozen, lips pressed into a thin line. He knew. They all knew. Briggs licked his lips, his face now ghostly pale. His voice cracked. He tried to regain composure. It was useless. Vanessa didn't move. Didn't blink. She waited. The weight of his lies was crushing him in real time. And then, he broke. I might have, he stammered. His eyes flickered toward the screen, where his own damning words still echoed in the ears of everyone present. Vanessa tilted her head. You might have what, Officer Briggs? Briggs swallowed again. His breathing turned shallow. Malcolm's pulse hammered as he watched the moment unfold. A long pause. Briggs' eyes darted around the courtroom. The jury, the judge, the spectators. He had no way out. Briggs dropped his head. I lied. The words came out in a whisper. Weak, broken. And then, the courtroom exploded.
Gasps.
Murmurs. Someone in the back blurted, What the hell? Malcolm heard his mother sob, but this time, it wasn't out of fear. It was relief. Vanessa simply nodded once, as if she had expected this all along. Speak up, Officer Briggs, she said, her voice clear, sharp, cutting through the noise. What exactly did you lie about? Briggs exhaled, his entire body shaking now. He looked like a man watching his life burn to the ground right in front of him. He squeezed his eyes shut, as if hoping that maybe, just maybe, when he reopened them, this would all be a bad dream. But when his eyes flickered open, nothing had changed. The truth was out. And there was no escaping it now. His voice barely reached above a whisper. I lied about everything, a woman in the back gasped. A juror shook his head in disgust. Judge Reynolds' expression darkened. Are you telling this court that you knowingly falsified your testimony? Briggs flinched. His career was over. Yes, Your Honor, he admitted, barely audible. Vanessa inhaled deeply, turning to the judge. Your Honor, given this officer's admission, I move for an immediate dismissal of all charges against my client. Judge Reynolds didn't even hesitate. Motion granted. Silence. Malcolm's entire body went numb. It was over. The guards at his side stepped back. The tension that had been gripping his muscles for weeks, for years, it began to unravel. His mother broke down in quiet sobs behind him. Malcolm turned, his eyes burning as he met her gaze. He was free.
Free.
But this wasn't the end. Because what happened next? That was the part no one saw coming. The courtroom was in chaos. Murmurs turned into heated whispers. The sound of shuffling feet filled the air. Somewhere in the back, a reporter was frantically typing on a laptop. Malcolm sat completely still. The words motion granted still rang in his ears. It was over. His mother, tears rolling down her cheeks, clasped her hands together, silent, shaking, as if in prayer. For months, she had been preparing for the worst. For years, she had been preparing Malcolm for moments like this. But nothing had prepared her for the moment her son walked free. Vanessa gave Malcolm's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. But her job wasn't done. Because Briggs, he wasn't walking away from this. Judge Reynolds was livid. He removed his glasses, exhaling slowly. His face unreadable, but his eyes? Pure disgust. Officer Briggs, the judge said, his tone steady, dangerously controlled. I don't think you fully grasped the gravity of what just happened. Briggs still had his head down, his shoulders slumped, his entire body trembling. The once powerful officer, who had spoken with so much authority, who had lied under oath without a second thought.
Now?
He looked like a broken man. The prosecutor, who had so confidently backed Briggs, now shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He looked embarrassed. Exposed. Vanessa's voice rang through the room, steady, unwavering. Your Honor, I formally request that Officer Briggs be charged with perjury and misconduct. The weight of her words settled over the room. He deliberately falsified evidence, lied under oath, and nearly sent an innocent man to prison based on nothing but racial bias and abuse of power. She paused, letting the gravity of it sink in. If Malcolm Hayes had not had competent legal counsel, she didn't need to finish. Because everyone in that room knew exactly how that sentence would end.